الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام الأتمان الأكملان على محمد رسول الله سيد الأولين والآخرين وإمام الأنبياء والمرسلين والشافع المشفع يوم الدين، وعلى آله الطيبين وأزواجه الطاهرات أمهات المؤمنين وصحابته الغر الميامين ومن استنى بسنته واهتدى بهديه إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، حياكم الله أيها الأحبة إلى هذا اللقاء المتجدد بعد انقطاع لمدة ليست بالطويلة ولا بالقصيرة، لكن كانت في جولة دعوية في المملكة المتحدة.
Indeed, all praises are due to Allah, and may the greatest and most complete blessings and salutations be showered upon the Messenger of Allah, the leader of the first and the last, the Imam of the righteous, and may Allah also shower those perfect and complete blessings upon his noble companions and his pure wives, and those who follow them until the day of resurrection. To proceed, I welcome you, my brothers and sisters, to a renewed session, a new session tonight in our series of talks for Islam for Deaf. And this comes after a brief break that wasn't particularly short, nor was it particularly long. And this break has occurred due to a trip that we had to the United Kingdom, calling the people to Allah, and a dawah trip. May Allah Azza wa Jal, may Allah accept from our Sheikh and the efforts that went behind them.
آمين آمين. حديثنا في هذه الليلة أو في هذه الأمسية هو عن هذا الأمر العظيم الذي قد لا يتطرق إلى الأذهان، وقد يغفل عنه كثير من الناس ولا يفرقون بين جزئيه، ألا وهو العلم والمعرفة أو المعلومات. فرق بين العلم والمعلومات سنبينه.
And tonight's lecture is about something of great importance and significance, and that is the difference between knowledge or seeking Islamic knowledge and information and sort of bits of like almost data.
أولا لا بد أن نعرف كلا منهما. فالمعلومات هي كم من الأخبار جمعت لتشكل إما مقالا أو تعبر عن حدث، هذا يسمى معلومات.
So before we proceed and we explain the difference between them, we have to start by first defining what each of these terms actually means. And the first of those, meaning al-ma'lumat, which is information, we can define it as being, it's a bit hard to define actually or translate the definition, but it's essentially news that is gathered, or data that is gathered, that's probably a better term, data that's gathered to form a view or to express what happens in an incident.
وعند الحديث عن المعلومات فإننا نتحدث عن المعرفة، وهناك فرق بين العلم وبين المعرفة، فهذا يعلم وهذا يعرف، وهناك فرق أيضا سنبينه.
And we also have to be conscious that there is a difference between simply factually knowing something and actually having knowledge of something. So there's a difference between having information that one is cognizant of and actually what we would call knowledge in the terms of the Sharia. And we'll explain the differences between these.
وبالمثال يتضح المقال كما يقال. مثلا لو أخذنا الدواء ونطبق عليه المعرفة والعلم، الدواء مثلا نأخذ نوعا من الدواء الذي هو مسكن الآلام المعروف الذي يسمى بالباراتيسامول مثلا، هذا كل الناس تعرفه، تقول الباراتيسامول معروف وهو يعني يسكن الآلام، لكن الذي عنده علم به هو الذي درسه وتعمق فيه، وهو الطبيب والصيدلي، فهو يعرف ماذا يعالج وما الأمراض التي قد تتضرر باستخدام هذا النوع من الدواء. صاحب المعرفة لا يصل إلى هذا العلم لأنه عنده معلومات وليس عنده علم، لأن العلم معلومات تكتسب من خلال التطبيق والممارسة والدراسة، يعني نظريا وتطبيقيا. أما صاحب المعرفة فهو ليس عنده إلا العلم النظري، ليس عنده تطبيقي.
So if we take an example, then what we are trying to show and express will become clear by the will of Allah. And if we take an example, or the example that we take, if we take the example of paracetamol, the well-known pain relief tablets that we all know about. Everyone knows that this is a mild form of pain relief that relieves pain. However, the one who has proper knowledge of it, as we're defining, this is the person and the individual who knows and has studied it. So they know the bounds within which paracetamol can be used. They know how it works and how to administer it. They know, for example, when it can be harmful. So they have knowledge of what it actually is, and that knowledge is combined with a practical knowledge of how to administer it and how it should be used. As for the individual who knows that it can be used to address ailments and simple ailments, then this is the individual or the person who simply is cognizant of it, or of how it works, and we wouldn't say that they have knowledge of it per se.
فالمعرفة هي ما شاع وانتشر من خبر، شاع وانتشر بين الناس. أما العلم فأمر آخر. العلم هو أمر يدرك يعني إدراك الشيء بإحدى الحواس، إما السمع أو البصر أو هكذا، بإحدى الحواس. والعلم هو أمر مطلق، كان يعني تصورا أو تصديقا، يقال عندك علم بكذا، ما عندك علم بمعنى تصورته أنت في ذهنك، أو أنك جاءك الخبر به فصدقته لأنه من جهة موثوقة. مثلا الآن عندنا هيئة الغذاء والدواء، يقولون مثلا هذا الدواء كذا أو هذا الغذاء ينفع في كذا، فنحن نأخذه منهم علما لأننا صدقنا، لكن ليس لنا يعني الآن أصبح معرفة، هذا النوع من العلم أصبح معرفة فقط، عرفنا صدقنا، لكن ليس لنا دراية به عميقة. فهذا الفرق بين العلم والمعرفة أو المعلومة.
So we can say that the individual who knows something at face value, this is just a simple cognizance of it. And I don't know, Tom, if there's an easier word or a more simpler word that I could use. Just shout out if there is. Whereas having knowledge of it is something that is more in depth. So the individual can, they know the thing, how it works, and they know how the thing can be administered. And again, the Sheikh gave an example. So if we had, for example, a pharmaceutical body who say that medicine X, it benefits for such and such an ailment, we can take that and we can understand it and we can take that knowledge, but we wouldn't say that this is in-depth knowledge. It's like we're just cognizant and we're just aware. I suppose there's an awareness of a fact that medicine X, it benefits. That's awareness of a fact. Whereas that medical body or pharmaceutical body who have done the research and they know how it works and they know what the boundaries of it are, they are those who have knowledge of it. So I suppose in English we could say it's having in-depth knowledge of it against having an outward appreciation of the thing that it works without an in-depth appreciation.
وإذا يعني تكلمنا عن ما يتعلق بالعلم والمعرفة من ناحية الشرع، فلا بد أن نرجع إلى أقوال أهل العلم. فقد قال الباجي وهو من علماء اللغة وعلماء يعني الإسلام، عالم مالكي أبو الوليد الباجي، وهو من رجال الحديث، يقول ماذا؟ يقول في كتابه الحدود، يعرف العلم، يقول هو معرفة المعلوم على ما هو به، على حقيقته، معرفة المعلوم على ما هو على حقيقته، فهذا يكون عالما. لكن الذي عرفه على غير حقيقته بس عرفه معرفة كما يقال سطحية هكذا ظاهرية، فهذا عنده معرفة وليس عنده علم. أما صاحب العلم لا، هو يعرفه على حقيقته.
And since we are talking about the Islamic legislation and these terms in light of Islam, it's necessary for us to refer to the scholars of Islam to see what they say about this matter. And the scholar, or one of the scholars that we're referring to here, is Abu al-Walid al-Baji, who is from the scholars of the Maliki school of thought. And he was a scholar of Islam, he was a linguist, and he was a scholar of hadith. And he mentions in one of his books, Al-Hudud, or the definitions, and he defines knowledge. And he says knowledge is awareness of information or awareness of the thing that is known in conformity to how it actually is. So an awareness of something, I suppose you could translate it as an appropriate awareness of something, or an accurate awareness of something without using knowledge within the actual definition. Whereas the individual, if they have inappropriate or incomplete or false knowledge of something, i.e. they have knowledge of something that doesn't reflect its actual reality, or that they don't have knowledge of its complete reality, then this is just having data, or this is simply having information without actually knowing it.
ويقول الشريف الجرجاني، وهو من كبار علماء، يعني من كبار علماء العربية وغيرها، يقول في كتابه التعريفات لما عرف العلم قال هو الاعتقاد الجازم المطابق للواقع. الاعتقاد الجازم. أما المعرفة لا، اعتقاد ظني، اعتقاد ظني، يعني قد يكون صوابا وقد لا يكون. أما العلم فهو الاعتقاد الجازم المطابق للواقع.
Another one of those scholars that we will look at and we mention is Sharif al-Jurjani. who was another one of the scholars of Al-Islam. And he has a similar book where he looks at definitions, and he defines knowledge as being certain belief that is in conformity to reality, or ascertained belief that is proper. You could translate it either way. Whereas simply having information is it's a degree that's lesser than this. It's a speculative awareness, or it's an awareness or a belief that isn't quite certain, because the individual doesn't know, like the examples that the Sheikh gave, they don't know, for example, how the paracetamol works, for example.
ويقول الإمام ابن القيم في الفرق بين العلم والمعرفة أو المعلومة، يقول مبينا ذلك، قال هناك فرق بين العلم والمعرفة لفظي ومعنوي، يعني من جهتين، لفظي ومعنوي. فأما الفرق اللفظي فإنه يتمثل في أن المعرفة يقع على مفعول واحد، قال تعالى فعرفهم وهم له منكرون، كما في سورة يوسف الآية 58. بينما فعل العلم يقتضي مفعولين، كما قال الله عز وجل فإن علمتموهن مؤمنات، كما في الممتحن الآية 10. فإن علمتموهن، علمتم والضمير هذا المفعول الأول، مؤمنات المفعول الثاني. ثم يقول فإن وقع على مفعول واحد كان بمعنى المعرفة، كما في قوله تعالى وآخرين من دونهم لا تعلمونهم الله يعلمهم. إذن هنا بالنسبة لنا معرفة، بالنسبة لنا معرفة.
The Sheikh and scholar of Islam, Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, he also has some words that that explain the difference between knowledge and simply holding on or having information. And he said that these differences, he outlines the differences. He said the differences are linguistic, and there are also differences as relates to the actual meaning. So firstly, he talks about the linguistic differences between simply holding on to information. And this is an Arabic word, al-ma'rifah, which is maybe awareness, we could translate it as. And in the language, in the Arabic language, this ma'rifah, this awareness, it's transitive, meaning that it takes the verb falls upon one object. So that's the difference. So ma'rifah, which is awareness, it has one object in the grammatical makeup of the sentence, whereas knowledge, it falls upon two objects. So this is a linguistic difference through which we can differentiate between just awareness, al-ma'rifah, and knowledge. That ma'rifah, it has one, they're both transitive, so they both take objects, but ma'rifah, awareness, it only has one. And the example of this, Shaykhana, Surah Yusuf, al-ayah 85.
58.
58. And the first example of this is in the chapter of Joseph, verse number 58, where Allah the Most High said, and Joseph's brethren came, and they entered unto him, and he recognized them, but they recognized him not. So this recognition, it falls in the language, it only falls upon them. There's no two objects that the verb has. Whereas for knowledge, it falls upon two objects. And the example the Sheikh gave was in the Quran, where Allah says that, which means, and if you know them, and this is the first object, if you know them, that's the first object, to be believing women. And believing women is the second object. And this is the knowledge. And this is the difference between the awareness and knowledge through the lens of language or linguistically.
وهذا الذي ذكرنا عن ابن القيم هو في مدارج السالكين في المجلد الثالث الصحيفة 533.
And what we have mentioned is from the book, the famous book of Imam Ibn al-Qayyim, Madarij al-Salikin.
الآن نأتي إلى العلم نفسه. ولي أنا في تعريفه طرح خاص بي، فأنا أقول بأن العلم هو كالإنسان، روح وجسد. العلم كالإنسان، روح وجسد. نعم.
So let's look at knowledge in and of itself. And I have a particular take on this. And the example that I give is that knowledge is like a person, that it's made up of a body and a spirit or soul.
لا أسمع شيء.
لا? Tom, did you hear me? Did I translate that? نعم شيخنا تفضلوا. الله يبارك فيكم.
طيب، قلنا العلم روح وجسد. أما جسده فهو المعلومات، وهذه يستطيع الوصول إليها كل أحد، إما من الكتب أو اليوم من الإنترنت ونحوها. فالمعلومة يصلها من هو أهل لها ومن ليس بأهل لتحملها. حتى الطفل الصغير يستطيع أن يأخذ الكتاب أو يفتح موقع الإنترنت ويقرأ، فيجد الذي قلنا هو جسد العلم، وهو تماما يشبه جسد الإنسان. كل أحد يراه، المحب والمبغض يراه، يرى الجسد، لكن يبقى الروح. فإن الروح كما جاء في الحديث: الأرواح جنود مجندة. الأرواح جنود مجندة، ما تعارف منها ائتلف وما تناكر منها اختلف، كما في صحيح مسلم من حديث أبي هريرة. فهذا الفرق بين الروح الذي هو الجوهر والجسد الذي هو العرض كل الناس تراه، لكن الجوهر خفي لا يراه إلا خواص الناس. نعم.
So when we say that the individual or humankind is made up of the body and the spirit, the body, this is the information or the data. And this is something that everyone can obtain or anyone can access, whether they are deserving, whether they are the people of this who can benefit from this particular data or not. And it's like a small child accessing the internet and accessing lots of information. And this data is just like the body in that it can be seen. Everyone can see it and it's all manifest. As for the spirit, this is what's internal, and this is the makeup of the data. And it's as referred to in the hadith of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, that the spirits or the souls, soul is probably a better way, the souls are kind of conflicting armies. Those that like one another, they'll flock together, and those who dislike one another, they will argue against one another. So the body is the outward manifestation and like the data, and the soul is like the inner to that outer.
وأما العلم الذي هو بمعنى الروح فهو ما يعطيه الله عز وجل لمن شاء من خلقه، كما قال الله عز وجل: واتقوا الله ويعلمكم الله. وثمنه الذي يكون مقابله هو التقوى. فالإنسان إذا كان متقيا لله فإن هذا العلم يثمر وينفع. وإذا كان غير متقي لله فهو ليس عنده من العلم إلا العرض أو الجسد، ليس الروح. نعم.
And as for the spirit of the knowledge, or the essence of knowledge, this is what is granted to the individual by Allah the Most High. And this is what's referred to in the statement of Allah the Most High: and fear or be conscious of Allah, and Allah will teach you, i.e., He will provide you with insight as to the reality and the inner knowledge of things. And whosoever fears Allah and is conscious of Allah by following His commandments and staying away from His prohibitions, Allah will bless this knowledge, and He will compound this knowledge to the extent where the individual becomes knowledgeable. However, if the individual, or if an individual, does not fear Allah and simply disobeys Him, etc., then the information that they have, it's as though they have the components of the physical body, but the actual soul and the spirit of that body is lacking. They don't have it due to their disobedience.
العلم هو نور يلقيه الله عز وجل في قلب من علم الله من قلبه الإخلاص والصدق والخير، كما قال الله عز وجل: إن يعلم الله في قلوبكم خيرا يؤتكم خيرا.
So knowledge in its actual essence is light that Allah the Most High casts into the hearts of those who fear Him and those who are knowledgeable. And this is as Allah the Most High mentions in the Quran. Indeed, if Allah sees good, Shaykhana al-ayah,
إن يعلم الله في قلوبكم خيرا يؤتكم خيرا.
The verse being that which means, if Allah knows that which is in your hearts to be good, then indeed He will grant you with that which is good.
وهي الآية 70 من سورة الأنفال.
It's the 70th verse in Surah Al-Anfal.
وهذا العلم هو كما سماه النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ميراث الأنبياء، ميراث الأنبياء. والميراث لا ينال إلا بالقرب، بالقرابة. من لم يكن قريبا من الميت، يعني لم يكن من العصبة وهم أقرب الأقرباء للميت، فإنه لا يحق له أن يأخذ شيئا من هذا الميراث. وهكذا هذا العلم، ولذلك قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم: إن العلماء ورثة الأنبياء، وإن الأنبياء لم يورثوا دينارا وإنما ورثوا علما، وإنما ورثوا هذا العلم، فمن أخذ، وإنما ورثوا العلم فمن أخذ بحظ وافر، كما في حديث أبي الدرداء عند أبي داود بسند صحيح.
And this knowledge, when we refer to this knowledge, in actual fact, this knowledge is the inheritance, and that the legacy, the bequeathed legacy of the prophets. And for this reason, as with any legacy or any estate that is bequeathed after someone's death, the only people who can benefit and who inherit it are those who have a close relation to the deceased. If they don't have a close relation with the deceased, i.e. a close blood tie, and their relatives, then they have no right to take from the inheritance. And this is as the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said: indeed, the scholars are the inheritors of the prophets, and the prophets, they did not leave behind any wealth. They didn't leave behind dirham or dinar. So whosoever takes this knowledge, they have taken something that is indeed great. And it's from the hadith of Abu Darda, reported by Imam Abu Dawood, and it's authentic.
والسؤال كيف نميز صاحب العلم من صاحب المعرفة؟ وللإجابة عن هذا نقول هناك 4 علامات يتميز بها صاحب العلم عن صاحب المعرفة.
So the question begs, how do we differentiate and how can we see the difference between the person who has knowledge and simply the person who holds on to data and information? And in summary, we can say there are 4 distinguishing traits, or there are 4 ways in which we can do this.
العلامة الأولى هي علامة العلاقة بين الطالب والعالم، فإذا كان هذا الطالب ملازم للعالم ويأخذ عنه فإن هذا يكون من أهل العلم، وإن لم يعرف له شيخ وعالم معروف فإنه لا يكون من أهل العلم وإنما هو من أصحاب المعرفة أو معلومات.
So the first way we can differentiate and distinguish between the one who has knowledge and the one who simply has information is to see at the relationships, or to look at relationships. And that's the relationship between the student and the scholar. If you see that this student is or has a close relationship and accompanies a scholar and is attached to the people of knowledge, then know that they are from the people of knowledge. If they are not, and they do not have these relationships, and they do not have a teacher, then know that they are a person of information and data.
وفي الحديث النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول إنما العلم بالتعلم، فإذا لم يتعلم عند عالم فهو ليس حامل علم وإنما هو صندوق معرفة، صندوق معلومات.
And in the narration of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, where he said, knowledge is only acquired by seeking it, by learning. Therefore, if an individual doesn't learn through a scholar, then they cannot be counted from the people of knowledge, or the people, the learned people. Rather, they will only become a repository, a box of information and data.
وقد قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم في حديث أبي الدرداء من سلك طريقا يلتمس فيه علما سلك الله به طريقا من طرق الجنة، يعني ذهب إلى العلماء وأخذ منهم العلم، فإن هذا يكفر له طريق إلى الجنة، الله عز وجل يضمن له طريق إلى الجنة لأنه صار من حملة العلم وليس من أهل المعلومات والمعرفة.
And in another narration, also reported by Abu Darda, where the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said, whosoever traverses a path, seeking through it knowledge, Allah makes easy for them a pathway to paradise. This refers to the individual who goes out and seeks knowledge from the scholars. They seek knowledge from the scholars and they become from the people of knowledge. So they actively traverse this knowledge, this path towards knowledge.
ولهذا يقول الإمام الشافعي في أبيات له أخي لن تنال العلم إلا بستة، العلم لن تناله إلا بستة، يعني 6 أشياء، أما المعرفة ينال الإنسان بدون أي شيء. أخي لن تنال العلم إلا ب6 سأنبيك عن تفصيلها ببياني، ذكاء وحرص واجتهاد وبلغة وصحبة أستاذ. ضع تحت هذه 4 خطوط. وصحبة أستاذ وطول زمان، يعني طول زمان دراسة ملازمة لهذا الأستاذ.
And for this reason, the scholars of Islam, and from them, the Imam al-Shafi'i, he has some lines of poetry where he discusses how knowledge can be acquired. And he says that which means, my brother, you will not attain knowledge except through 6 steps that I will tell you about. And this shows us that simply holding on to data or information, it's a simple sort of 1-step, 2-step process, whereas acquiring knowledge is a process that takes many steps. شيخنا حفظكم الله، ممكن تعيدوا الأمور ال6؟
نعم أخي، لن تنال العلم إلا ب6 سأنبيك عن تفصيلها ببيان: ذكاء وحرص واجتهاد وبلغة وصحبة أستاذ وطول زمان.
عفوا شيخنا،
ذكاء وحرص واجتهاد وبلغة. نعم. البلغة يعني ما يسد الرمق من العيش، لا تنصرف إلى الدنيا وتترك الطلب بل تمضي أكثر وقت مع الطلب. وصحبة أستاذ يعني تصاحب الأستاذ دائما معه. وطول نعم. زمان، طول زمن في الطلب.
أثابكم الله. So Imam Shafi'i says, my brother, you will not acquire knowledge except through 6 that I will now tell you about in detail. The first is intelligence. The second is persistence and persistent motivation. The third is expending your efforts in doing so. The fourth is not to be distracted by the dunya. The fifth is to accompany an ustaz, to accompany a teacher. And the 6th is to spend a long time doing it, i.e. the knowledge, you cannot acquire it overnight. It takes time and all of these dedicated factors in order for you to acquire it.
والأمر الثاني الذي يعني يعرف به العلم ويحصل به، ويعرف به العالم ويحصل به العلم، هو العمل. كما قال علي بن أبي طالب: العلم يهتف بالعمل فإن أجابه وإلا ارتحل. فالإنسان الذي لا يعمل بالعلم لا يعد عالما، وإن كان عنده المعلومات، لكن هو أصبح مثل الكتاب، عنده معلومات ولا يعمل بها.
The second thing, or the second criterion through which we know and can differentiate between knowledge and information is the action. So the one, and this is as Ali, may Allah be pleased with him, mentions, he says that knowledge calls to action, and if the action answers it, it will remain. But if it doesn't, then it will disappear. I.e., the knowledge that an individual acquires will disappear if they fail to act upon it. And if they don't act upon it, then this individual isn't to be considered a scholar or a person of knowledge. Rather, they are like a book, in that there is no action and there is no fruit to that knowledge that or to that information that they have.
والعلامة الثالثة هو أن هذا صاحب العلم يبذله لمستحقيه ولا يخفيه عن المحتاجين إليه من طلاب العلم، فهو يبذل العلم ويجلس للناس ليعلم لوجه الله، لا أن يكون تعليمه للناس مشروط بمبلغ مادي وإلا لا يعلم. وكذلك لا يكون تعليمه للناس مشروط بأن يحضر عدد وإلا لا يعلم. فإن العالم يعلم، كما جاء عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أنه قال يأتي يوم القيامة النبي وليس معه إلا الرجل والرجلين والنبي وليس معه أحد، فهو يعلم. نعم.
The third is that the person of knowledge, they'll expend every effort to deliver that knowledge and to teach that knowledge to those who are deserving to learn it. And they will not hide it or conceal it in any way. Rather, they sit with the people, they benefit the people, they teach the people for the sake of Allah. And this is unconditional. They do not say that it is with the condition of them being paid such and such, nor do they put a condition that so many people must attend for me to give a lesson. And we benefit this from the hadith, the narration of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, where he talks about the prophets who will come on the day of resurrection. And some of those prophets, they will come, and with them, i.e., having answered their call, will only be one or two people or one or two individuals. And some prophets will come and no one would have answered their call. نعم شيخنا ثابكم الله.
العلامة الرابعة التواضع، فإن العلم يذلل صاحبه فيجعله خاضعا لله متواضعا لعباد الله، فلا يتكبر ولا يرى نفسه فوقهم. نعم.
The fourth of these signs is the individual being modest and being humble, because knowledge humbles an individual. It humbles them to their maker, to Allah, and it makes them modest and it makes them humble towards the creation of Allah.
وأيضا مما يميز العالم عن صاحب المعرفة أنه يأتي الناس وإن لم يأتوه هم، فهو يأتيهم إلى مجالسهم. انظر إلى نوح عليه السلام كيف كان، كما قال الله عز وجل أنه كان يأتيهم ليلا ونهارا وفي كل مكان وكل وقت، كما في سورة نوح قال ربي إني دعوت قومي ليلا ونهارا فلم يزدهم دعائي إلا فرارا وإني كلما دعوتهم لتغفر لهم جعلوا أصابعهم في آذانهم واستغشوا ثيابهم واستكبروا استكبارا إلى غير يعني ذلك من الآيات. فإن صاحب العلم حريص على هداية الناس، حريص على هداية الناس، يدعوهم بانفراد كل واحد كما قال نوح ثم إني دعوتهم جهارا ثم إني أعلنت لهم وأسررت لهم إسرارا، يعني كل واحد وحده آتيه بيني وبينه أدعوه. لأن العالم كالأب حريص على صلاح أبنائه وصيانتهم من الهلكة والضياع، وهكذا العالم يكون حريص على الناس، لا أن يكون يريد النجاة لنفسه ولا يهمه، يعني كما يقال في المثل أنا ومن بعدي في الطوفان، يعني أنا أنجو وليهلك من يهلك، وهذا ليس حال العالم. إذا رأيت صاحب المعرفة الذي تظنه عالم لا يهتم لأمر الناس ولا يحرص على هدايتهم ودلالتهم، فإنه ليس عالما وإنما هو صندوق معرفة، صندوق معلومات.
Another of the distinguishing signs is that the individual who has knowledge, they go to the people if the people do not go to him. And a great example of this is the Prophet of Allah, Noah. For indeed he used to go to his people, as is described in the chapter of the Quran, the chapter of Noah, where he said, He said, "O my Lord, verily I have called to my people night and day, but all my calling added to nothing but to their flight from me and the truth. And verily every time I called unto them that you might forgive them, they thrust their fingers into their ears, covered themselves up with their garments, and persisted in their refusal, and magnified themselves in pride. Then, verily, I called to them openly. Then, verily, I proclaimed to them in public, and I have appealed to them in private. And I said, ask forgiveness from your Lord. Verily, he is oft forgiving." So this is the persistence and the mission that the individual has, the person of knowledge has, that they want to guide people, to save the people from the punishment of Allah. And in actual fact, the scholar is like a father. Just as the father takes care over the children, over their guidance and their rectification, the scholar wants this for the people. They don't want to be the sole survivor or the sole person who is successful or the sole person who passes. Rather, they don't want to, and it's not like the saying, "Indeed, I will survive and none with me will survive." It's some sort of saying. Rather, they are encouraged and they are persistent in their efforts to guide the people. And this is in contrast to the person who holds on information.
وأخيرا من الفوارق التي يعرف بها العالم من غيره ما عنده. إذا كان الذي عنده هو قال الله وقال الرسول وقال الصحابة فهذا عالم، كما قال ابن القيم: العلم قال الله قال رسوله قال الصحابة ليس بالتمويه. ما العلم قصدك؟ ما العلم نصبك للخلاف سفاهة بين الرسول وبين رأي فقيه. وأما صاحب المعرفة فإنه يتلقف من أي وسيلة، من تلفاز، من إذاعة، من جريدة، من مجلة، من موقع إنترنت، كما قال حذيفة رضي الله عنه، وعفوا كما قال عبد الله بن مسعود وحذيفة، وكذلك أبو قلابة عبد الله بن زيد الجرمي، كلهم قالوا أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: بئس مطية الرجل زعموا، يعني المطية هي التي يركبها، فهو كله زعموا أي قالوا ما عنده غير قالوا، لكن ليس عنده إسناد لهذا العلم ولا تبيين لمصدره الموثوق، وإنما يأخذ ويتلقف من كل أحد. فهذا الذي يتثبت ويسند عالم، والذي يتلقف ويرسل هذا جاهل صاحب معلومة ومعرفة ولا علاقة له بالعلم. والله تعالى أعلم، وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه.
أثابكم الله وبارك فيكم شيخنا، ما شاء الله محاضرة قيمة جدا ونافعة، حفظكم الله.
الله يحفظكم.
And from the last characteristics, finally, the last characteristics of those who have knowledge is the content of the knowledge that they give. So if they are someone who says that Allah said, and the Messenger said, and the companions of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, and may Allah be pleased with them, said, then know that this is a person of knowledge. And this is as Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah said, knowledge is, Allah said, the Messenger said, and the companions said. And it is not simply the statement or the view of a faqih, of a scholar of jurisprudence, i.e., it's not simply the memorization of the stances of scholars. It's rather the root. Allah said, the Messenger said, and the companions said. And this is in contrast to the person who has data and information. For they will take their knowledge, and they cite their knowledge from every source, from the TV, the radio, the internet, etc. And it's been reported on a number of the companions of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, from them Hudhayfa, Ibn Mas'ud, Abu Kilaba, that they said, what a lacking mount, i.e., what a bad riding animal is to say they said, i.e., they are disparaging those who, when it came to knowledge, they didn't have a chain of narration, or they didn't have their knowledge based on any legitimate authority. They didn't have it based on any chain or anything legitimate. However, the person of knowledge is the one whose knowledge is linked back to Allah and the Messenger, in contrast to the one who is simply a repository of information. And here is where our Shaykh ended, and he sent peace, salutations and blessings upon the Prophet Muhammad and upon his family and companions to the day of resurrection. And I ask Allah the Most High to reward our Shaykh for what was a very interesting lecture, and some really, really beneficial points. أثابكم الله شيخنا.
آمين وإياكم جزاكم الله خير وبارك فيكم.
Jazakallah khairan, Sheikh. Jazakallah khairan. As Akil said, it was very beneficial, and it's important to know the difference between seeking knowledge and seeking information, inshallah. And I think, inshallah, we might do another talk expanding on this topic as well, inshallah. So yeah, we'll continue next week, Sunday, from 7 till 8, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan, and see you then. Assalamu alaikum.
السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.